yourself a merry little Christmas. Make the Yuletide gay. From now on, our troubles will be miles away. Here we are as in olden days, happy golden days of yore. Faithful friends who are dear to us, gather near to us once more. Through the years we all will be together, if the fates allow. Hang a shining star upon the highest bough, and have yourself a merry little Christmas now. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright. Silent night, holy night, Son of God.
Hey, Orion Online, Merry Christmas. We're so thrilled that you've invited us into your lives and your home or your car or through your phone or your computer or whatever you've done to invite us in today.
Maybe you're watching in the bathroom.
Where do you watch when you watch online?
I mean, it depends. If I'm on my phone, I end up in the bathroom inevitably.
I mean, it happens, right? But this is like the best way to invite us into your home, if that's
Yeah.
where you invited us, because we're in your house this morning and we can't see all the unfolded baskets of laundry in your living room.
And the kids running around crazy doing cartwheels off the couches. Like, we're cool with that. We're good.
We're totally
We're
cool
good.
with that.
We're
So,
good. We're
hey,
good.
one of the things we're doing this morning is a candle lighting by the end of the service, and we definitely want you to be a part of that. So make sure at some point in the next couple minutes, run around the house, grab a candle
A
of any
smoke
kind.
candle, a woodwick, a Yankee candle.
I hate the woodwick candles.
Dude,
They're a disappointment. I expected so much more
don't even
crackle
talk
and
to me right
pop.
now. Woodwick for life. Woodwick
There's
only.
no crackle pop. Yeah, whatever.
Whatever.
Mandals. by the
Mandals.
way. They're
We can agree on that.
For dudes, it's
If
a
you-
mandal.
if you have a mandal,
no
grab one of
candles,
those.
mandals. So grab a candle. It will be. They probably think it's going to be the whole service now. I made such a deal out of it. Grab a candle. It's going to be an important part, and I think just a beautiful part of the whole service this morning.
It is.
What we're going to be doing today is looking at the story in Mark 8 of a moment when Jesus healed a man who couldn't see, and it's going to be an incredible story, but it may not be the story you would expect on Christmas. But
Right.
here's why we're doing it, is because we want to make sure that we don't overlook the power of what Christmas accomplished for all of us.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just a baby in a manger. It was to give all of us the ability to see far beyond just what our eyes can do. So we even have a point in the service where we're going to hear a story from a couple of guys who've grown up their whole life without the ability to see what
it's
God has
powerful.
done in their life and
Yeah.
how they've navigated a world without vision. And
Yeah.
it's going to be a really cool moment.
Really
So
cool
what
time.
else are we doing today?
Yeah,
dude?
we're going to sing some Christmas songs. We're going to worship together. And so we're really, really excited that you're here. But we also want you to take this opportunity to invite the people in your digital world, wherever you're
All around
connected.
you. Get 'em.
So get at us in the comments. If you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button so you can see our future videos. If you're on Facebook,
Yeah.
share this into your news feed. It's like inviting your whole Facebook community to join you in this service. And so
Yeah.
we're excited that you're here, and I think you should be excited to share it with other people as well.
Man, I mean, you know, the last couple years have just been really difficult in so many different ways. And then even more recent, what we've experienced just north of us with our neighbors in Oxford,
Yeah.
and the tentacles that has created, that's touched and impacted so many lives. It's probably more important than ever, at least for me it feels like,
Yeah.
that we're reminded of what we're promised in the book of John, that when Jesus entered into humanity, it wasn't just to come as a baby, it was to come as the bringer of light, a light that according to John overcomes darkness. Because our world's been touched, and our specific world lately has been touched by a lot of darkness, that we need to be reminded that Jesus pushes back. Darkness doesn't win. Jesus wins. So we're thrilled that you're with us. We're excited for Christmas, and we're excited to have it together. So Merry Christmas.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, good evening, y'all. How's it going? Merry Christmas. It's good to see you. If you've never been here before, my name is Matthias. I'm one of the worship pastors around here, and we thought it would be really fun and kind of nostalgic even to sing some Christmas carols and other songs together to start this day off. So let's go ahead and stand as we do that.
King.
Kensington, how are we this evening? Huh, what? Oh my gosh, and I said, good morning, how are we this evening? You guys can have a seat. I'm so sorry. You know, this thing's throwing me off. Last service, I was standing at the door and I was saying, good morning, Merry Christmas, good morning. And one of the security guys looks over at me and goes, hey, Sam. I'm like, yeah. He goes, what time is it? I'm like, it's 2 o'clock. Why? He goes, you're saying good morning. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just not used to this. So, good evening. How is everyone doing this evening? Well, yes, doing all right. Okay, cool. Are we excited that Christmas is finally here? Yeah, okay, I heard a few kids. You're excited, right? I heard that. You're like, yeah. Awesome. I'm excited too, man. I'm so excited. This is my first time celebrating Christmas with Kensington. And so this year, if you've been celebrating with Kensington in the past, this year's a little bit different from what I've heard. I've heard stories of years past of breakdancing Santas and, I don't know, the Grinch coming in from the ceiling and just all kinds of crazy production things. But this year, it's really cool. We're really just like sitting in the presence of God together. And it's about really celebrating that Jesus came to bring light to a dark world. And so we have an awesome experience planned for you this afternoon. Not this morning, this afternoon. And so we're excited to share that with you. Now, let me just share a quick announcement for you. This Sunday, we are having no in-person gatherings. None of the Kensington campuses, across all 6 campuses, nobody is having in-person gatherings. So those of you joining us for Orion Online, welcome. We're excited that you're here. This Sunday, you are all going to be Orion Online, okay? So we have a digital service planned and recorded. Jeremiah from our Clarkston campus has pre-recorded a message that we're calling New Year, New Hope, and we're excited for that to launch us into 2022. And so today we're going on a journey together looking at the light that Jesus brought in that little desert town in Bethlehem, 2,000 plus years ago. And so to set our trajectory this morning, I want to share a poem with you. In the darkness of night, the light came. A child was born, a son given, Emmanuel, God with us. All heaven and earth rejoiced, declaring news of the newborn King. Good news of joy, a new hope of everlasting peace. Mary wrapped him as a gift, treasuring this moment in her heart. God's gift to all the world, holding the light of life and love, the wonder of it all. He was born, he lived, he died sinless on a tree, defeating sin, death, and the grave, a living sacrifice. He set all captives free. God with us, Emmanuel, our living hope, the Prince of Peace.
In the darkest weeks of winter, when the day barely seems to shake itself free from dropping off to sleep again, and the night stretches long and cold and deep, it is then that the people trundle greenery and lights into their homes. We haul out tangled reels of twinkled lights to make our neighborhoods gasp-worthy, to reflect in the wondering eyes of children, and to warm every passerby. Our existence revolves around light. Our own planet loops in endless adoration around the sun. The seasons, days, and our sense of time all hinge on the angle and span of its rays reaching down to touch us. The light makes green things grow. Crops, rainforests, delicate flowers bloom, grassy plains, spiring pines. The plants absorb the light, and it sustains them and feeds the world. Light reveals beauty. Without light, there would be no sunrise, no tree line, no fireflies, no view of our eyes. We could not behold the glistening on the waves, the million pinprick prisms in a diamond, or the smile on a loved one's face. And for us, the light draws us up out of bed, out of our stupor, and we wake. Light energizes us to move, work, and play. When we're caught or lost or pressed down in darkness, light beckons us forward and promises us freedom and refuge and wholeness. But what if all the light is swallowed by darkness? The power goes out and every tree and rooftop goes black. The tall, waxy candle refuses to light. The stars disappear one by one, as if plucked deliberately from the dark sky. The sun is held down beneath the horizon and cannot rise. If darkness extinguishes the light, what would we feel? What would we see?
Oh come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel, that mourns in lonely exile here. Until the Son of God appear. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel.
For much of the history of the church, the 4 weeks of December have been about more than just getting all the gifts for all the peoples. It's been a time set aside to remember several things. A time to remember that God once made a promise thousands and thousands of years ago that every bit of darkness that exists would one day be driven away permanently, and all that darkness creates will be done. It was a promise as well, and a time to remember a promise that 2,000 years ago began to be fulfilled when he stepped into creation, when the God of creation became a part of his creation and literally walked in the dirt with us. When Jesus, whose name Emmanuel literally means God with us, it was the beginning of the fulfillment of the promise that he would one day drive back all darkness. These 4 weeks are to remember the promise. It's to remember the entry of that promise and the start of it that we celebrate as Christmas. But it's also a time that I think should lead us to remember even farther back, like all the way back. I'll take you there briefly. It's in the book of Genesis, the first chapter and the first verse. It tells us this, that in the beginning God created heavens and the earth. And the earth was formless and empty. and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. It's interesting to me that as the Bible opens up in the early moments of God creating, in the early days of Him forming, that part of what existed was darkness that permeated everything. The start of the Bible and the start of the story that we're brought into, that was already in place for all of eternity, that was God's story, it begins when we start reading it with darkness shrouding everything. But if you read the next verse, verse 3, tells us that there was a moment that God spoke beyond that. Because darkness has a way of creating things itself. I think darkness can create loneliness. I think darkness creates a lack of clarity. I think darkness creates confusion. Darkness can create suffering. And so in that darkness, God spoke the 4 words that from His voice pierced the darkness and drove it back. Those words being, "Let there be light." And part of the story of the Bible is that at that moment and for a period of time, everything that was exactly how God intended it to be. That we were how God intended us to be. And how we viewed ourselves and how we treated ourselves and how we viewed one another and how we treated one another. That the earth was how it was intended to be. The weather wasn't broken and too cold or too hot, it was perfect. That there was peace and harmony, not just between people, but between every aspect of creation. There's pictures of predators and their prey that once laid together and got along with one another. Everything for a season and a period was exactly how it was intended to be. But the story of the Bible is also a story that tells us that there was a moment that darkness again entered into that creation. But it wasn't a physical darkness. It was the darkness that, according to the Bible, was the radiation of our decision to begin to reject God. From our earliest ancestors all the way through history to you and I to today. From the biggest of decisions to completely reject God to the smallest of decisions to say, in this area, life will work best if I do what I want. According to the Bible, what happened in that moment, the first time it happened, was that there was a darkness, not physical, but much more destructive, that entered creation, and it broke everything. It broke humanity, it broke relationships, it broke our minds, it broke the planet. There are places in the Bible that literally say that at present, the world, the earth, it's groaning in pains, waiting for the day it will return to its glory. Those groans are seen in the forms of earthquakes and tornadoes and bad weather and everything that's wrong in this planet. And so part of what the story tells us is that there was another day. And this is what happened 2,000 years ago that makes Christmas more than just something that happened then, but still happens now and is yet to still happen. When God spoke and brought light back into creation in a very different way. This time under the promise that this light would permanently, one day, drive back all darkness and everything darkness creates. But this time it wasn't in the form of a fiery ball that hung in the night sky. It was in the form of a baby that lay in a manger. Later on in the Bible, in a book called John, the Apostle John says it this way: in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And He was with God in the beginning. So that through Him all things were made. Without Him nothing was made that has been made, and in Him was life. And that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. If you grew up in a tradition or in a home where you celebrated Advent, then you might already be wondering if we messed this up this morning and lit things backwards. It's like, wait a minute, the center candle, does that get lit last? That's the light candle. That's the Christ candle. That's supposed to come at the last lighting of the candles. But here's why we did it backwards today. Because today we celebrate, and many of us believe, that this story of Jesus is not just a story, it is a reality. It happened. It's happening. And there are aspects of it that are yet to happen. And it is the light of Jesus that entered humanity that creates the light of hope. It's the light of Jesus entering humanity that creates the light of peace. It's the light of Jesus that creates the light of joy. And it's the light of Jesus that creates the light of love. I just want to talk for a couple of minutes as we celebrate Christmas, and we're so thankful that you came and joined us for it. But I want to talk for a few minutes about what it means that Jesus is the light of creation. There's a lot of words that get thrown around, a lot of ideas and a lot of terms, especially this time of year, about Jesus, about God, about spirituality and faith, some of which I think sometimes because, one, we're accustomed to them, two, they're not normal words and phrases that we use on a regular basis, can kind of float up here in the sky and become more ethereal than real. And I want to take some of them and I want to pull them down out of that ethereal religious realm. Like this idea that Jesus is the light of creation and what exactly that means, because light has the power to do all kinds of things. But probably some of the things that light does the most is it brings clarity. When the lights are off, everything's uncertain. And when the lights are on, everything becomes incredibly clear. And I really do believe that part of what it means that Jesus is the light of creation is that he brings a clarity to us and in us and through us that nothing else brings or achieves. So I'm going to pray because I really do believe that he's here. I believe there is a God. His name is Jesus. He's present with us now. There's this incredible promise in the Bible that even where just 2 or 3 of us are gathered, there's a few more than that in our community physically, in our community online. And so I'm going to believe that the words in this book and the promises are true, that somehow in a heavier, unique way, God's presence literally hovers and hangs in this place. And so the last thing any of us need to hear is just me for the next little bit. If there's a God and he hovers and he's here and he speaks, then I'm going to ask him to give our ears the ability to perceive what it is that he has. So let me pray. Father in heaven, we come to you right now and I acknowledge that you, I believe, as do so many, you are light. Not just the creator of it, not just the sustainer of it, not just the giver of it, but the very essence of it. There really was a time some 2,000 years ago when in a very mysterious way that we cannot even fully comprehend yet, you as the God of all creation, who spoke planets into being, who spoke stars into being, who spoke light into being, who spoke this world into being, who spoke us into being, became a being. And you wrapped yourself in skin. And you didn't stay distant and unknowable, but you actually became the God who, having made us out of dust, then came to this planet and walked in the dust with us. Would you be present to us tonight, I pray? Would you speak? Would you be heard? Would you be clear? Would you do what only you can do, is to be so tender to meet each of us where we're at, some of us convinced you exist, some of us ready to celebrate a belief and a deep, deep conviction that indeed you are God. And some of us here, maybe just going through motions. It's what we do. It's Christmas. We go to church, but not certain that you exist, and maybe some of us pretty convinced that you don't. And yet, if you do, then I'll trust that you can do what no person could ever do, which is to reveal yourself and to speak for yourself. In Jesus' name, amen. So I don't know if you guys know this, but a young man who walked in with the candle, that was actually Sam's son. I've seen that a couple times now, because we've had 2 services now, and then we were able to kind of run some things through and watch it. I don't know what it is. Anybody else feels like that was one of the coolest things that I've seen so far, and I've gotten the privilege of seeing the whole service. There was just something really emotional for me when I watched that. I don't know if you paid attention or saw it. Maybe you didn't feel it. If you didn't, that's fine. You don't have to. But I think for me, just watching it, I wanted to acknowledge for a minute just this idea of watching that young man walk in with a candle and just the reality overwhelming me that our God was once a young man, and he was the candle. It's just a powerful idea. So Jesus, the light. Here's what's interesting about Christmas to me, among so many things, especially in my realm as a pastor, is I think when we come into Christmas, unlike so many other times of the year, regardless of your church background, whether you do this all the time and this is a part of your routine week in and week out, or whether maybe you just do it a few times a year, or maybe you never do this. Maybe your family just said, hey, just come, we want to do it as a family. You're like, oh, okay, fine, and you came in tonight. Here's what's interesting about Christmas. Whether you have no church background or a consistent church background, this is one of the few stories and the aspects of Christian faith that I think so many of us know so many of the details of. And it kind of puts us all in a unique way into a familiar place because we're all pretty familiar with details of the story that tell us things like there was a young virgin Jewish girl who was visited by an angel and made an incredible promise. Details that tell us there was a census that had to be taken and an unexpected journey, a hotel with no room and a stay that didn't go as expected. Details that tell us that along the way and as mom's about to give birth, some shepherds show up and barge into the room, which if you ever think about that, that's an awkward moment. When my wife gave birth to our son, she was literally moments away from Tobin appearing into humanity, and our best friend and his wife showed up. Wife was late because she was like behind him, like out in the lobby, and he came in with a gift, and none of us had kids yet. We were the first ones to have kids, and he comes busting in. He's like, "Hey, I brought you a gift." I'm like, "You don't want to come in here right now." Like, but think about that. This is the moment. Like, we're familiar with this. Here comes these shepherds, and then there's wise men. I mean, there's just a crew. Although they didn't come that night, they came about 2 years later. We're familiar with these parts of the story. The problem is that so often in churches at this time of year, that's where we camp. We camp in those aspects of the story. Here's the problem with that. There's so much more to the story. And when we only camp in the familiarest details of the story of Jesus, the coming and the 2,000 years ago and the Christmas and the star that hung in the sky, is that we miss the rest of the story. We miss the details that I think matter most. There's so much more to the stories. I have 3 kids. 2 of mine are twins. They're twin daughters. They're going to be 15 in January. Most of the time as twins, they are best of friends, but every now and then, like, girl fight and get out of the way when they fight. So recently, something happened in our home. This has been a common thing throughout the years. One of my daughters came to me and she goes, she's kind of like weepy. She's got tears in her eyes. She goes, "Dad, my sister totally walked by and smacked me in the back of the head." I was like, "What? Well, why'd she do that?" She goes, "I don't know." I'm like, "What do you mean you don't know? Were you guys arguing?" She's like, "No, she just came and smacked me." I'm like, "Well, we don't just smack people for no reason in this house." I mean, we don't smack people for reason either, but maybe sometimes. I'm like, "We're gonna find out." So I grab her, I start to march upstairs, and she grabs me, she goes, "Well, I did kick her first." I was like, "Well, okay then." So as a dad of 3 kids, I've learned in moments like this, help me out, there's always what? More to the, right, so when you think about this story, and you think about a star in the sky and shepherds and wise men and even a baby in a manger, those are all important parts of the story, but they're only one chapter of a much bigger story. There are so many more details to this story. There's more to this one. And so here's what I want to do for a couple minutes. I want to steer us away from the more recognized parts of the Christmas story, because I want to take us to a time when the baby in a manger became a man, to show us what it is he actually came for. Because I'll tell you this, and some of you know this, it was not to be immortalized as a baby in a manger, but as the bringer of light. There's a book in the Bible called Mark. It's one of the gospel accounts. That's a group of books that tell the life and the teachings, the stories, and the miracles of Jesus. Mark chapter 8. Very short story, but I think it's a story that sums up in so many ways exactly what it is that Jesus came for and what it is that it means that he is the light that brings light to all mankind. Mark chapter 8, verse 22 goes this way. "And they came to Bethsaida, some people who brought a blind man, and they begged Jesus to touch him." So part of what I want to do is it's only a few verses, about 4 verses we're going to read. I'm going to read a few of them, talk about a little bit to make sense of it, and go back to the next one. So let's camp here for a minute. There's a couple of guys that bring a friend to a town called Bethsaida, and the friend that they brought to meet Jesus, hoping he'd do something for this guy, was a guy who was blind. I think in a lot of ways that blindness is probably one of the realest, most tangible experiences of what it means to be shrouded in darkness. I don't assume that any of us in this room, maybe some of us online are watching, and that's something that's a reality for you. But if you can imagine for yourself blindness and think about blindness, it literally is probably the only experience of truly being in an existence stripped of light. So as a kid growing up, I don't know if you were the same as me, but I absolutely hated the dark. Like, not just afraid of it, I actually hated it. And it wasn't for the normal reasons that maybe you think growing up. For me, I grew up with a dad who was blind. And he lost his vision pretty early on. It was a medical complication, and so he had no recollection of seeing. By the time he was 5 years old, his eyes were actually physically removed from his head. So blind his whole life. But when I was super young and I didn't understand how blindness worked, I remember trying to figure out, I can still like visually, I can totally picture it in my head. If I close my eyes, I can remember a time when I would lay in bed just paranoid at how you become blind and trying to figure it out. And I even remember my dad telling me and explaining it to me. But there was a point where I thought what happened is that if you stayed in the dark too long or kept your eyes closed for too long, that's how you went blind. There was even a time that my dad worked for a hospital and he worked in a dark room, which was a perfect job for a blind guy because he just developed film all day long with no light. And so I think like that is his job, and just trying to piece together things throughout his life, I came to this conclusion that if you closed your eyes too long or stayed in the dark too long, that's what made you go blind. And so that's why I hated the dark, and I hated the whole nighttime, bedtime routine. So this is literally what I do at night. I would lay in my bed, I'd look up, and I would just stare at the ceiling, and I would fight as long as I could to keep my eyes open. You ever do that where you just keep your eyes open, and then all of a sudden things just start to slowly go black, and you're like, it's going black. It's because your eyes are closing. Well, that's what I would do. I would just lay there until my eyes would just, from weight and tiredness, just finally close on me. But I was paranoid for the longest time that I wouldn't wake up in the morning with the ability to see. So I'm going to embarrass myself a little bit here, but I want to show you, no lie, I've kept this my entire life since I was 6 years old, what I used to go to bed with, and this is what would give me comfort at night. Like some of you are this way, some of you have kids this way. Do you have like a thing that if you don't get that thing into the routine of going to bed, like World War III nightmare, everything melts down? Anybody? You got that kid that's got that thing? Or maybe, yeah, some of you are pointing, right? I was that kid, I had the thing. If I didn't have the thing, there was no going to bed, because this is what made me feel safe and comfortable at night. Super weird that this is it, but this is what it was. Animal, right, yeah. You remember Animal? He was from the Muppets. What did he do? Anybody remember what instrument he played? He was a drum. What did I didn't ask the first service this. What did he say? Did anybody remember? What was his thing? His key line all the time. All right, other than drums. Woman. You remember? He was always chasing the girls. I don't know if it's because of that or because my dad was a drummer, but Animal was my go-to. I just loved Animal. And this is like the real thing. Those eyes have been painted over like 85 times. This shirt used to be pure white and really silky. It's not, if you could feel it, it's kind of like sticky, actually. It's not silky at all. Matter of fact, I'll even embarrass myself further. I used to call this, the part of his shirt here, I used to call it, I don't even say this out loud, I called it my softie. Because I would just lay there and I would do this with it, and it just helped me fall asleep. I couldn't go to bed without Animal. Like, this was my thing. It's super, super weird. This, of all things, is what brought me comfort at night. Like, I feel safe now. Really? Because this is, I used to do this, I'll tell you this, when my kids were growing up and they were a little bit younger, I would actually beat them upstairs and I'd hide in the closet. And as they would come into their room, I would stick this out of the closet door. And I'd make it growl. To this day, I have an 18-year-old son and my girls are about to be 15. They hate this thing so much. I know I'm paying a therapy one day, but it's funny. But that's what I used to reach for when I would be paranoid of the dark and I'd be scared to shut my eyes for too long. And I know as adults, we don't have the same kind of fear of the dark that we do as kids. But I do think we have a fear of what the dark represents. Because the dark, even in a non-physical way, I think is represented by all things that we hate. Loneliness, maybe depression, fear, hurt, suffering. I mean, the last couple of years, this is an interesting Christmas, because the last couple of years has presented to us, most of us, if not all of us, a kind of darkness that we've never seen, with a disease that's traveled the globe. There are people, many of you know, and many in our own community that will not be sitting at the table this year. Darkness has touched us all. In the recent tragedy with our neighbors in Oxford, most of us have not been that close to that kind of darkness. If the Bible's true and part of what darkness does is it's broken this world, then I think darkness is also in the form of what we see happen when the weather doesn't behave. It's what we saw happen to our southern neighbors in Kentucky recently. And some of you, in your own personal life, this year has presented to you some of the biggest battles you have ever faced and fought. Maybe in your health, your marriage, your job, Maybe just your own well-being as your outlook on the future is uncertain. But I think what we have a tendency to do when any form of darkness enters our world is we try to also reach for something. Like we reach in our own bag and try and grab something that's gonna brighten things up with a greater sense of love or hope or joy or peace, or a sense of success or accomplishment or security or identity. When life, marriage, whatever it is, your health, whatever aspect of life feels like it has less brightness than we want, what we try to do is brighten it up by also reaching for our own form of an animal that truthfully does very little, if anything, to actually compete with and defeat darkness and bring light. And whether that's reaching for better education, whether that's reaching for more stuff, whether that's reaching for success or believing I gotta have the right relationship or the right family or live in the right zip code or whatever it is, there's all kinds of stuff in life that we've convinced ourselves, if I reach for that, if I get hold of that, that's gonna help bring more love or joy or peace or whatever it is, bring you need into your life. And the reality is all of that and all of it does is nothing more than what reaching for that animal did for me. It just created an illusion of safety. It created an opportunity for me to believe something was helping me that in fact wasn't helping me at all. So I think of this guy in this story who shows up to this town looking for help, whose life has been shrouded in physical darkness that you have to believe has led to a certain emotional darkness, where jobs don't work the same way for him as for other people. Relationships don't work the same way for him. Life doesn't work the same way. And so that's why he's here in this town of Bethsaida. He's reaching. He's doing the same thing. He's like, maybe if I can get my hands on some form of an animal, maybe that's gonna help me as well. Because the rumors are that there's this new teacher. And not just that he's teaching like nobody has before, but that he's doing what nobody has before. He's doing things that nobody's even been rumored to do. So he's in this town hoping that if this guy has helped other people with similar things, maybe he can help me. I mean, literally, this is what he's doing. He is himself in this moment reaching for something in hopes that it will deal with his own darkness. And so here's the moment that he comes across Jesus. Verse 23 says this. He took him by, the blind man, he took him by the hand and he led him outside the village. So he is Jesus. And I've read this story a lot of times over the years, but it was only a couple of years ago that the detail of this particular verse really stuck out to me. When it says he took him by the hand and he led him. Okay, so you've got this guy that shows up, friends bring him there, in hopes that the rumors about this Jesus are true and maybe he can help him. Maybe he can fix what's broken, he can restore what's lost, he can give sight where there's blindness. And he's mustered up enough faith, enough confidence, probably shrouded with certain doubt, questions, and uncertainty, but he's mustered up enough that he's reaching out, he's hoping Jesus can help. And the first interaction is not that Jesus says you're healed, which we know he could do. It's not that he snaps his finger and everything's fixed. He just grabs his hand and they go on a walk outside the village. It doesn't say he just grabbed his hand. It says he led him outside the village, which means there's at least several minutes of this guy having hope that Jesus would do something, and instead he just takes his hand and he's going to walk. He's got to be thinking at some point, I came here for a miracle, not a date. Like what is happening right now? And so when I really caught that detail years ago, I thought, why did he take him by the hand? Because he doesn't need to, even if he's gonna heal him. As a matter of fact, in this very chapter and the chapter before, there are miracles that we read that Jesus did. One of which was to heal a woman's daughter without even being in the same city. So he doesn't need to be physically present. He doesn't need to physically touch. So why in the world does the story tell us and make sure to include the detail that Jesus grabs him by the hand and leads him? I think the reason that he did is to teach this man how to hold his hand. See, I wonder if some of you would even describe maybe your pursuit or experience of God in a similar way. Because I know that for some of you, you would say that there was a time where you also reached. And you thought a little bit like this guy, all right, if the rumors are true, and if there really is a God, if Jesus really is him, I'm gonna give it a try, I'll go to church, I'll try out this Jesus thing. But for some of you, maybe there was a period where you felt like, nothing happened, nothing changed. I tried it, I journeyed towards him, I went through a little bit of the routine, nothing. It was all a little bit disappointing. And part of me wonders if in reality what was happening with you is what was happening with this guy. And it wasn't that nothing was happening. It's that even while there was still darkness and everything hadn't been fixed, God began to lead you by the hand. And you go, why would he do that? To teach you how to hold his. With my 3 kids, I'll tell you, over the years, one of my favorite moments, it's so simple, and you're the same way if you're a parent probably, is I just love holding their hand. My son's 18, that doesn't happen very much anymore. My daughters, they'll be 15 in January, the start of the year. And they're super independent, super strong-willed. They don't need dad for anything. So even now, here's what usually happens. Happened the other day, we were out. I go, my one daughter, Jocelyn, I just reached for her hand. And she goes, what are you doing? I was like, I'm holding your hand. She goes, why do I need to hold your hand? And this is what I always say to him lately. I go, you don't need to hold my hand, but I need to hold yours. And she goes, why? And I go, because I love the feel of your hand in mine. And then she'll usually let me hold her hand for 30 seconds until she pulls it away. But I love the moments where I just get to hold her hand. Even with my son, I don't hold his hand anymore at 18 years old. That'd probably be weird. He'd probably punch me in the throat. But I have noticed that when we're driving together, which isn't super often because he drives all the time and he's never home, but on the rare occasion that he's in the passenger seat, I've begun to notice in the last year that I often put my hand on his knee. Or it's why I kiss him constantly. And I'll never stop. Because touch is an incredibly powerful thing. Think about some of the moments that you've even experienced touch that was meaningful to you. Like, I'll give you a couple of examples for me, and maybe they'll remind you of some of your own. I remember holding my wife Nicole's hand when she gave birth to our son Tobin, when Jeremy about ran in the room. I remember holding her hand when our 2 girls came. I remember holding my grandmother's hand when she breathed her last breath. I remember my dad's hand reaching into the water of a lake where I was drowning when I was a little kid because I thought I could swim, and I went way too far and fell off a sandbar. And I'll never forget my dad's hand reaching in and grabbing me and pulling me up. You remember the first time you held the hand of somebody you were interested in, somebody you were dating? I'll never forget I remember the first time, 25 years I've been married, and I still remember the first time I kissed my wife. I remember the first time I held her hand. You remember those times when you're dating somebody and you haven't held hands, you haven't kissed, nothing's happened yet, and maybe you're at like a movie theater or you're sitting somewhere and you put your hand on the armrest and they put their hand on the armrest and you just kind of scoot your hand up and then all of a sudden your pinkies touch and you're like, oh, like it's just like cool moment, right? Like, oh, pinky touch. Like those moments where you just, touch is a powerful thing. It's an intimate thing, especially hand to hand. Like I could come up and I could put my arm around you, I could put my hand on your shoulder, but hand to hand, there's something far more personal, far more intimate. And I think part of what Jesus is doing with this man is showing him, before I fix anything, I want to draw you into the most important thing, which is relationship with me. I want to hold your hand. And I think that that's what he's after with you and I. But with this guy, there's still more to the story. Continues to go on, and it says, so after he takes him by the hand and leads him outside the village, when Jesus had spit in the man's eyes and put his hands on him, Jesus asked him, do you see anything? Now, I've never performed a miracle, but this seems more like a prank than a miracle. I do have 6 younger brothers and sisters, and this is totally something I would have done growing up. Like, no, seriously, I'm spitting in your face to help you? Like, what? There's something totally lost in this context because it's not included in the text. And it's that in Roman and Jewish culture, there was a superstitious belief that saliva had healing power. So there was an offensive nature with spit, just like with us, but there was also this weird superstition that certain saliva and aspects of it had certain healing powers, although nobody had ever experienced it because it was a superstition. But there's also some scholars that believe what's happening in this moment is Jesus is nodding back to creation itself, all the way back to the beginning. Because what the Bible tells us is that when God made the first of us, is that he literally, think sandcastle in the sand, he carved and sculpted a man, a human. And then when he had this dirt man, he breathed into him life. And so the very first creation happened with dirt and with the breath of God. And so part of what some scholars believe is that he's nodding back to creation. And so maybe both of these aspects are for Jesus in this moment to say, then and now, I am the God above superstition. I am the God above creation. I am the God above everything. And then he proves it next. When he asked him, do you see anything? The man replied, I see people. They look like trees walking around, so everything's not clear at first.
And so once more, verse 25, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes, and then his eyes were opened, and then his sight was restored, and then he saw everything clearly. One of the things I really do believe about God, and I think that his entrance into humanity in the form of Jesus 2,000 years ago was the biggest moment of him doing this for us and inviting us into this, is that God is asking all of us, take my hand, and I will give you a sight that goes far beyond what your physical eyes will ever see. And I will bring a light that is brighter than any sun that hangs in the sky. And here's what I do know. I know that God is extending his hand to every one of us. I believe that. From the minute of our birth, he's been offering up his hand. If you take hold of his hand and you begin to walk with him, what I don't know is what he'll do. I don't know what he has in store. I don't know what it is he wants to address in your life, but I do know this, whatever it is that he has in store, there will probably be times where, like this guy, it'll seem a little bit weird. It might even seem disappointing. It might seem like he's doing nothing. But the longer you hold his hand and walk with him in this life, things begin to become clear in the light of Jesus. That he brings a clarity into our lives, a clarity to see, unlike anything else gives us a clarity to see who we are, why we are, what life is about, who life is about, why he made us. And it doesn't all happen at first. It evolves. It takes time. It grows. Like with this guy in the story. I love it that part of the detail intentionally included here is that when Jesus first says, do you see? He's like, not really. I see something. I don't know if it's people or trees or walking. I don't know. I can't really see much. And then he touches him again. And then it says his sight is fully restored. You may go, well, does that mean he wasn't really powerful the first time or he messed up the first time and had to do it again? I think what it is God showing to us not just what he does to bring light into our lives, but how he does it, which is in stages. It's a process. It's in the context of relationship as we hold his hand. Sometimes we rush to God because we want him to fix something. And our disappointment with God is that we gave him a try and it didn't instantly fix what I wanted him to fix. Maybe that's a thing in your life, a thing in your marriage, a thing in your health, or whatever it is. And we run to him or we go to church or we give the God thing a try and immediately things don't change. But here's what I have come to believe. I don't think walking with God hand in hand was ever intended to fix something immediately. But it was intended to fix everything eventually. There's a story I want to show you for the next couple of minutes of two guys who actually have, in a very unique way, learned to navigate life without the ability to see. Both of them blind since birth. One of them my dad, and one of them his lifelong best friend that in many ways is like my older brother, Tony. My dad's name is also Craig. So for the next couple minutes, I just want you to hear their story of learning to see in a very real way as they met Jesus that had nothing to do with their physical eyes. Watch this.
My eyes could see like a flashbulb from a camera or sunlight or a little bit of light for a while, but that was it. But probably by the age of 5, they atrophied. And some people say, well, then you just see blackness. Well, no, I don't see anything. There's absolutely nothing there. I was born premature. My mother had a ruptured appendix, which threw her into labor. So I was born at 6.5 months into the pregnancy, put in an incubator for 6 weeks. And when I was about maybe 4 months old, my mom said, she looked at me and said, he is not following my fingers, and took me to the doctor. And the doctor said, yep, he's blind. When he gets older, get him a pair of dark glasses. And that's all she was told. I moved to Michigan when I was 10, went to the special school, and the teacher said, Tony, why don't you show Craig around, let him know what everything is in here. And he took me on a tour, and we just got to be friends. And about 3 weeks later, we were wrestling around and collided heads. And my hand hit his head, and you'll excuse the expression, but this is the way we talked in that generation. I suddenly said, you're a colored boy. And Tony goes, yeah, didn't you know that? I said, no. That was one of the times when I realized if I've known this kid for 3 weeks and didn't know he was black, then what does it matter? All it meant to me was because of what I was told, that there's these, you're white, they're black, and a lot of people, especially back then, said you shouldn't be playing together or get together. And Tony and I just ignored them.
We just, got to be friends. And a lot of times he would invite me over to, stay the night with him. At that time, there were a lot of taboos about, not associating with, if you were Caucasian, you didn't associate with African American people. But like I said, we just kind of overstepped that. And Craig had been trying to get me to. Craig was he loved to ride bikes.
I did.
He really did.
I could balance on him
It was
perfect.
phenomenal. He had been trying to get me to ride the tandem with him. Matter of fact, he said that we were going to go down the alley.
Yeah, there was an alley in back of our house.
Yeah, and there wasn't going to be any problem. It would be a straight shot. So we hopped on the tandem.
Yeah, he was on the back,
Yep.
where you can't steer at all. All he could do was help pedal, and I was on the front.
He was steering. Mm-hmm.
And doing the steering.
Yeah. And so we were moving down the alley at a nice rate
Clip.
of speed.
I don't want to interrupt you,
Okay.
but I got to admit this part for myself.
All right.
I got real confident, and so I sort of turned around.
Oh, boy.
And I said, now, don't you really feel bad
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
that you didn't want to trust me and ride on this bike?
Yeah, that's
Just about when he was
Yeah,
ready to
I was
answer,
getting ready.
someone parked their truck back there.
We did not know it, and we hit that thing, and I was
Slammed
so upset.
into that truck.
I
He flew
said-
off the
I said,
bike.
man, I said, don't ever ask me to ride with you anywhere on anything. I was upset.
He wouldn't even, I said, get on this
No.
bike and I'll get you back to
No.
our house. He would not do it. Each had a job at a local hospital in the dark room developing the x-rays, which was perfect for us because we got around in there better than anybody else did.
For me, the dark room was significant because that's really where I met the Lord Jesus Christ, in the dark room. I had been struggling with whether I was really a believer or not. There were other people that had been struggling with it, and I really gave my life to Christ in the dark room, and I can just remember that. It was just slow, and I just really came to grips with my own personal sin, and I really came to grips with who Jesus was. Craig was the one that really challenged me about salvation. I hadn't really even thought about it, but one day, I think it was after church, and he asked me, Tony, are you really saved? And I thought about it, and I said, no, I don't think I am. And so the Lord really used him in a mighty way to really get me to thinking about spiritual things.
Well, honestly, I know some people say that you should know the exact time, date, PM, AM, almost to the second when you became a believer. For me, it didn't work that way. It sort of was a process of enlightenment, you might say. And I remember the gospel was shared with me when I was about 13. And that night I got down on my knees and did what the guy had said, trusted Jesus Christ. But there was nobody in my family that was a believer. And so I got way off base, didn't have any guidance. And yet, I am convinced that the Lord was back there working. Literally, the spiritual light was turned on. The best way I describe it, it was like spiritually I was in darkness or without nothing, dead in my trespasses and sins. And suddenly everything about Jesus made sense. It's been a growing process spiritually ever since. Maybe taking some steps back, but then always moving forward.
Before I was saved, I was very self-centered. Everything revolved around me and my world. And after Christ came in, he began to really take my focus off of me and really put it on him, change of how I understood life.
It's also the grace that he just shows me personally on a daily basis. I mean, if I was in his position, I probably would have taken me out years ago, and yet he still thinks I'm worth working through. And to me, that's just awesome that he uses me to do anything. I can't get over the magnitude of it sometimes. You know, I don't know why the Lord let me be blind, but I'll tell you this. If it comes down to me, and I often wondered, but having physical vision and letting it have caught me up so much in that I ignore the Lord, no thank you. It's much better to have him and not have the physical vision. And someday I'll have both anyway. I don't know how many times people have said, I bet you guys can't wait until you have your vision and can see Jesus. No, I can't wait to meet him. I can't wait to hear his voice. I can't wait to feel his arms around me.
Yes.
Feel the nail scars. And just know him. To me, that's more important than being able to see his face. Now, when I do see his face, sure, I'm sure there'll be some excitement there. But right now, I relate more to the person he is and meeting him personally.
Yeah.
Some of their stories are insane. I'll tell you stories about a time that my dad drove a car more than once. A friend of his would sit in the passenger seat and literally give commands while Tony was in the back seat. Be like, turn, left, 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 left. Like, they got pulled over once. Oh man, when my dad tells a story of that officer pulling him over and realizing he was blind, he about passed out. He's like, don't ever do that again. He's like, I never will. I think they did it the next day. So it's just ridiculous stuff. But I've always found it super interesting to talk to my dad and have him explain that he believes God gave him ability to see, even though he still can't see. Which for me has helped me all the more understand that there really is an ability God gives through his light to give our eyes vision that has nothing to do with your physical eyes. There's a friend of mine, his name's Tom. He used to always say to me that in life we spend way too much time trying to have all the right answers to everything. And he said instead we should spend more time trying to ask all the right questions. And I know my dad, as I've just understood his story more and more over time, that there was a point where he was all about having the answers to why he was blind and others weren't. And did God do this to him? And all kinds of answers just related to his condition. But there was a point where he stopped trying to seek those answers and he instead started asking different and I think better questions. Questions like, why am I here? Is there a God? Who is he? Why did he make me? Did he make me this way? And at one point even asking, is there something he could do for me even greater than restore my vision? And it was all of that that eventually led my dad, I believe, to learn that there's an ability to see even when you don't see. I really do think that that's why Jesus came. It is to present to us himself as the light of mankind that gives us an ability to see the true nature of what is, who is, of life, death, eternity, of everything. I also think that there is a reality that this world often blinds us from seeing him, from pursuing him. And sometimes we even tell ourselves we don't need the light of Jesus. I'm not living blind, I'm fine. The problem is when you're blind, blindness seems normal. And part of me wonders if that's not some of our story. Is that maybe you'd be tempted to say, well, that's great for him, it's good for them, it's good for some of you, but I don't need the light of Jesus in my life. And I just wonder if the reality that the Bible teaches there's an enemy of God who actually, believe it or not, one of the names he goes by is an angel of light, the father of lies. It's interesting to me that Jesus is the light of mankind, and yet the enemy of God, Satan, is described as an angel of light. He is a deceiver. Everything that God creates, Satan counterfeits. God creates light to bring life. He creates forms of light that actually lead us away from the light and towards death. And I just wonder if that hasn't been the course and the path for some of us. We've been reaching and grabbing all kinds of stuff in life to light up, to bring greater sense of joy and peace and love and a sense of purpose and identity, but it's ultimately just a bag full of this kind of stuff. It doesn't really create light. It doesn't really create life. And I wonder if you realize Christmas is not just a celebration. We've made it a celebration. But it's not just about a celebration. Christmas is about salvation. It is about the fact that there is a God. His name is Jesus. He stepped into creation to introduce to his creation himself and to beckon us to himself. And he extends his hand to every one of us, just like he did this guy in the story. Take my hand, walk with me, and watch what I will show you. There really is an ability to see beyond our eyes. And that's why Jesus came, to love us, to lead us, to hold our hand, to open our eyes, to teach us to see. Ultimately, according to the Bible, to save us. From what? Frankly, ourselves. And so here's what I'd love to do, because there's a lot of different ways you could respond to today. Some of you could just go, this is really nice for you. They go, this is really nostalgic. We like the lights and we like the carols. Or maybe you respond with just pure disbelief. You go, hey, this is good, it's nice, but it's nonsense. But I also think one way to respond is to receive it. If he really is real and he really is extending his hand, take his hand. You go, okay, but how do I take his hand? I don't see a hand to take. There's a verse in the Bible, it's in a book called Romans, written by a guy named Paul, who actually was once named Saul, who hated Christians. When he's introduced into the Bible, his whole purpose is to squash Christianity off the face of the earth. He was responsible for ordering the execution of some of the early Christians. He has an incredible moment where he encounters God face to face. In this supernatural moment, hears his voice. He actually has a moment, according to the story, where he's blinded temporarily until his sight is restored. It changes everything about his life. He becomes a follower of Jesus, plants tons of churches, one of the largest contributing authors to the Bible. And he writes to a church he started in Rome once, which I think is a way that we grab his hand. He says, here's what you do. If you want to walk into this supernatural relationship with God that really does happen, you believe in your heart that he was raised from the dead, and you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord. And there's just something that genuinely happens. Some of you, many of you have experienced it. I've experienced it. It's not just wishful thinking. It's not just just floating around in the sky, religious idea. There is a very real thing that happens when you reach for the God who is already reaching for you and take hold of his hand. And one of the ways you do that is confession of the mouth and belief in the heart. Confess that he's king, believe that he rose from the dead. You go, but I got lots of doubts, I got lots of things that don't make sense. So do I, so do we all. But if you can muster all of that up in one hand, the doubt, the frustration, the disappointment in God, all of that, and bring that to him along with another hand that reaches back, the scriptures say you walk into the relationship that you were made for with the God of creation. And so I want to give you a chance to do that. I don't want to celebrate Christmas and tell you all about the God that reaches for you and then not say reach back. So I'm gonna lead you in a moment of prayer. And here's what I would just love to ask you to do. Would all of you, just for the sacredness of the moment and the privacy of the moment, would you just close your eyes? And for some of you, you're like, well, I'm not here and I'm not in this moment. This is for somebody else. Great. I would just ask all of us honor the moment. So with your eyes closed, hear what I would say. If you would say to yourself, if there really is a God, and it's Jesus and he's reaching for me, then I want to take hold of his hand. If that's you, just do this. Reach your hand out. Don't worry about whoever's next to you. Don't worry about what your husband's going to think, your wife's going to think, your neighbor's going to think. This is you and your moment, your decision. Reach out your hand. Now imagine his and yours. And would you just confess this out loud with me? Pray this. King Jesus, I give you my heart. I give you my hand. Take my hand and give me your heart. Teach me to see. Amen. Yeah, that's all I got to say. You'll say a lot more over time, but I do think that that's where it begins. And the Bible is clear that when you do that, you have received him. We're gonna light candles in just a minute, and it literally is the same way. You're gonna have your candle lit by somebody just extending theirs out, and you're gonna receive that flame. And according to the Bible, that's how we walk into relationship with Jesus, is we receive him who extends his hand. And let me say to all of you, regardless of what you just did or what decision you may or may not have made or what you even thought of that moment, wherever you would describe yourself in relationship to God, believe him, reject him, think it's just superstition, let me tell you this, he came for you. The light of Jesus Christ came for you. If you love him, his light came for you. If you doubt him, his light came for you. If you hate him, his light came for you. If you believe there isn't a him, his light came for you. If you think you've gone way too far for way too long and messed up too big, his light came for you. He will never stop pursuing you, never forget about you, never give up on you. He will never stop extending his hand to you. The light of the world. Merry Christmas.
Said the night wind to the little lamb,
Jesus. Oh, Him, the Lord of heaven and earth. Oh, Him, King Jesus. Oh, Him, the Savior of the world. Yes, I exalt Thee, oh Lord. Yes, I exalt Thee, oh Lord. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright, round yon virgin mother and child. Holy infant, so tender and mild, sleep in heavenly peace. Sleep in heavenly peace. Silent night, holy night, Son of God, love's pure light, radiant beams from Thy holy face. With the dawn of redeeming grace, Jesus, Lord, Thy birth. Jesus, Lord, Thy birth. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright, round yon virgin mother and child. Holy infant, so tender and mild, sleep in heavenly peace. Sleep in heavenly peace.
So if God is a keeper of His word, the light of Jesus never goes out, but candles do. So we're going to blow these out together. But if you just do this, make sure you cover it. You don't want to put wax into the back of somebody's head. That's not a very Merry Christmas for anybody. But on 3, 1, 2, 3. But here's what we believe. Many of us believe this, and I've given my life to it, that the words in the Bible are true, that Jesus is not just the light of humanity, but darkness cannot overcome Him. That's why no matter what darkness we face, whether around us or even to us, we can still live in and experience a very real joy that is the joy of Christ. That's why we're going to end all of this together by singing Joy to the World, because joy is not an idea, it's a name, and it's Jesus.
All right, come on, let's celebrate a little bit. Let's get some hands going. Come on. on, just you sing. The glory. The wonders of his love. The wonders of his love. The wonders of his love. We will sing, sing, sing. We're singing joy to the world. We will sing, sing, joyful, joyful, we adore thee, God of glory, Lord of love, and hearts unfold like flowers before thee, opening to the sun above. Joyful, joyful, we adore thee, God of glory, Lord of love. Hearts unfold like flowers before thee, opening to the sun
It never fails. Every time I try to sing with you, I pull something in my neck. Man, how do you do that? We're so glad that you spent Christmas with us. We are so thankful to be invited into part of what is your routine and your hopefully celebration of all that is Christmas this year. Don't forget, next Sunday, 26, if you're planning to join us, no in-person gatherings. It's all going to be online, but we will be back in person in the start of the new year. So have a very Merry Christmas, and we'll see you next year.